If you've been watching the channel for any amount of time, you know that I tend to really, really enjoy big save the world style campaigns where an unassuming party gets shoved onto this great big destiny and they have to go out and save everybody in existence or save everyone on the planet, and through small acts eventually warp into big acts that take on like really huge and impossible opponents. Basically, I like JRPG style games. I love that stuff. And modern D&D is going in such a way that it tends to do that, but not always. Like old school D&D, you were kind of just a dude that did stuff. You were just an adventurer. You weren't like the chosen ones or anything like that. This particular Save the World campaign is actually set in the same universe as the Sands of series. I know there's a few Sands of Salabim and Sands of Horin series fans out there. I think you're going to enjoy this one because this is the campaign that kind of started the whole thing. The planet that this party is living on is called Zeros. And Zeros is a world where the most popular religion is basically is this god called Zion, and is essentially like Leviticus chapter judgment sort of god. Although he cares less about your personal life choices. Spoilers, by the way, if you ever watch or play in a campaign series of mine that's placed in the world of Zeros, in that Zion it actually behaves a lot differently than how the world perceives him. Surprise, surprise. It's one of those stories. In this world's backstory, there is a hero from a long time ago that was approved by Zion, and what he did is he went around and he unlocked like the 8 elements, all Tales of Symphonia style, and he beat this creature called the Void. And because of that, the world was saved and all this stuff happened, and he then ascended into godhood. You know, that kind of story. Like I said, this is very Tales of Symphonia in that the gods and heroes of this world have their own little dark edges to them, and like what actually was reported and what actually happened are very, very different. And essentially the heroes in this story are moving on in that sort of plot. They have already gone ahead and they have essentially unlocked what is basically amounts to an Earth temple, and they became like an avatar, like one of the characters' sisters became like an avatar of Earth or whatever. They were moving on and they were heading to the next country where they could get into the next temple, unlock it, and then continue on saving the world. I believe they were heading towards Salabim in particular because in Salabim and Horin, there was access to the Fire Temple. Once again, spoilers for that part of the campaign. Along the way, they got on a boat and they were heading south. Now, in this particular session, we already had, I believe, 3 or 4 players. I only remember 3 at the time, and we were adding 4. The 3 players included my wife, who was playing, I believe, a Saiyan named Hikaru. There was my friend who was playing his like hard-boiled detective character. He was super interesting. His name was Dimitri, and I believe he was a chosen soul. 3.5 edition D&D. And then there was another person who was playing a war mage. Now, they already did the first temple, and they went ahead and they helped Dimitri's sister become like an avatar of Earth or whatever, and they have now been commissioned to get on a ship and go. However, another person wanted to join the campaign. One of my best friends in the whole world, his name is Brian. Now, Brian wanted to come along, and he wanted to play a campaign, and he hasn't been able to in a long time, but I wanted to include him. He was really good, and I owe him a lot. So I said, okay, here are all the races available, here are all the classes, this is the world's history and stuff, because I took my world lore very, very seriously. And he looked at it, and he said, I want to play a Wind Elf. And this was very frustrating to me, because I kind of made the Wind Elves as a throwaway thing to another friend of mine. I have run this campaign a few times, and Wind Elves were really frustrating because I kind of made them as a catch-all Weeaboo race where they were like located in like this isolated northern Japanese country, and I was saying, oh yeah, they're in their period of isolation and there's not a lot of Wind Elves around because when I was younger and in high school, I wanted everything Japanese, and then when I got to college, I wanted nothing Japanese. So I didn't want like Japanese-esque culture in my game, but he really, really wanted to play a Wind Elf, and I was like, fine. So I spent a long time trying to figure out how to incorporate this character into the game, because it was really rare for Windows to leave that country, and it was even rarer for one to like find a party. So we started talking for a long time, and we came up with a good backstory for his character. So his character was the son of a diplomat who was experimenting and going out and trying to get information and seeing if the country called Chiwagate should rejoin with the rest of the world. And yeah, I didn't know where to go from there. So I thought for a bit, and we discussed back and forth, and we're like, okay, what if this happened? And so I came up with this encounter I really, really liked. I just saw Pirates of the Caribbean. The fourth movie, whichever one that one was really weird. And I took some ideas from that. And essentially, I came up with the idea of this ghost ship that haunts the oceans. This ghost ship would go around and it would sail underwater upside down. And as it would sail upside down, it would encounter ships. And when it would encounter a ship, it would then like meet it keel to keel. I think that's what it's called. The bottom of the boat. Isn't that called the keel? Basically, the two ships would touch keel to keel, and then the ghost ship would slowly envelop like the physical ship above it with like ectoplasm and ethereal energy. And if the ship above got fully like enveloped, then it would be captured inside the ghost ship, inside a ship in the bottle. And I thought this was a really cool idea. You could go and fight the ghost ship if you go to the bottom of your ship, like down to the keel, and there would be like a hatch, and if you open it up, you can go in and you would go under upside down, and then you would be in like this ghost realm. And man, it was actually really cool, and I loved it a lot. So in Brian's character's backstory, he went in and he brought a character. In his story, his ship got captured, but since he was a monk, he managed to kind of escape, and he managed to like fight his way to a part of the ghost ship that was safe. But we'll get to that more in a minute. So the party goes inside the ghost ship, and they start like weaving their way through it, and they come across like a hallway where they're fighting some ghosts, but then they see another group of ghosts like peep their head out from a door and then like beckon them in. So the party goes inside this room, and inside this room there's a bunch of other spirits, ghosts, and a couple like living people. And a couple of these living people were essentially being kept alive because the ship in question had several what were called spoons of sustenance. And spoons of sustenance were spoons that essentially, if you put it inside of a bowl, it would create food for you enough to last you for a day. It wasn't very filling, it wasn't tasty, but it would sustain you. I don't remember if I made this up myself or if it's an actual item. Actually, isn't it an item? Called a sustaining spoon. So yeah, I did get it from that. So Brian's character was being kept alive just through that, and he was hiding out because otherwise the ship was outnumbering him, and they were in this safe zone. While there, they added Brian to the team, and they decided to go on to the next area into the ghost ship. And they elected that if they overthrew the ghost ship, then they could go ahead and they could save everybody and they could get their ship back. So they went inside another area, and they went inside the ship's sick bay. Now inside the sick bay, I wrote like this very nothing encounter. Like there was a bunch of like burnt and charred bodies, like 4 or 5 of them on these beds. And then there was like this ghost doctor just kind of muttering to himself. And he was very clearly a physician of some kind. And they decided to interact with him for whatever reason. I figured they might instead try to attack him since he was a ghost, and literally almost every ghost they encountered outside of that safe room was evil. In fact, I even said I even mentioned inside that room that pretty much everyone not in there went insane. But for whatever reason, they decided to talk to this doctor. And the war mage decided, oh, I'm going to go get a checkup. All right. So they go inside, they talk to the ghost doctor, and the war mage is like, oh, doctor, give me the news. I got a bad case of the measles. I don't know. The doctor is giving him an exam, and he's like, oh, okay. And he's like doing all this stuff, and he's analyzing things. And they're just kind of chatting with him, and he's just going on about their health and scurvy and all this stuff that they just need to be mindful of when being on a ship. Until finally the war mage says, oh, did you know you're dead? And I wrote in the flavor text that if they tried to get a checkup, then he would try to, like, psionically or supernaturally dominate them. And I also wrote that he wouldn't actually act on this domination unless they mentioned that everyone was dead. So I had the War Mage roll a saving throw versus domination, nat 1. This was bad news. So right away, like, the charred bodies on the beds sprang to life. There were like 3 or 4 of them, and I just don't quite remember. Dimitri actually stepped outside during the exam to smoke, and the only people in the room was now a dominated War Mage, the Saiyan Keymaster, who already was injured from earlier, and a half-starved monk. And surrounding them were like 4 or 5 ghouls and this ghost doctor who could dominate. And right away, the ghouls leapt up and they tackled the 2 other fighters. Hikari goes down, Brian goes down, and he gets crit, and he gets crit bad. He takes like 20 damage right away, and they were only like level 5 or 6. They were not very strong, and 20 damage is a lot in low levels, especially for monks. So he goes down, the dominated frickin' War Mage goes up, and I told him, dude, you are on this doctor's side, and you are trying to kill the party, and this is bad news, because a War Mage who is unfettered is incredibly deadly. All they know is like high-level conjuration things like Fireball and stuff, and Fireball on a ship is bad news. But he told me he figured instead he knew enough not to destroy like his new ghostly allies, so he went ahead and drew his sword, and he was just going to attack Brian, who was tackled on the ground. And I was like, okay, roll your damage. Nat 20. And I was like, oh god. Confirm? I never have people confirm their damage, or at least confirm crits, because I don't like that. 18. He got him. Brian was prone. I said, okay, roll damage on your Kopesh or your Scimitar. Maxed out. He did like another 19 to Brian, which put him below negative 10 hit points. I was like, Brian, I'm sorry, but you've been in this campaign for a whopping 10 minutes, and within this time, you've gotten tackled and torn apart by zombies a little bit, and then you were decapitated by the War Mage. And at this point, this was bad. Like, so the only person in this room was Alex's Saiyan Keymaster. We've got another goddamn dead character, and a dominated one, and Dimitri's outside. He walked in as soon as Brian died, and miraculously, that was when their rolls started picking up. Dimitri had some enchanted guns, and he managed to like fire at the ghost, which killed the ghost, I think either right away or eventually, which freed the dominated War Mage, and they eventually fought back, but they are surviving on very little hit points, and they burned quite a bit of their spells with this. And to be honest, I was kind of like, this wasn't his fault at all, but I was kind of pissed at Brian because I spent a month making this ghost ship. I put a lot of creativity and all this shit into bringing a character that I did not want into my campaign into it, and he goes and dies on me in the first 10 minutes. I derailed my campaign for him. I spent a month making this encounter, and he dies. It's not Brian's fault. It's not even really anyone's fault. They were role-playing and doing what they wanted, but god damn it, that's just sometimes when the dice falls. So I finangled it a little bit. On board, there was a soul artist, and even though they did not want to use soul arts, by the way, if you want to know more about soul arts, check out our Dragons of the Grove campaign. I go more into what soul arts are in there. There was a soul artist on board who was powerful enough to cast Raise Dead. They put Brian back together. They cast Raise Dead on him, and because I refused to lose a month of work, and I refused to lose all of this, and that was kind of the only time I really fudged that. So they used soul arts to bring Brian back to life, and they eventually did conquer the ghost ship. It was a really great session, although I was kind of PO'd that that did happen. But dice fall where dice fall, man. And if you like that story, check out our other D&D stories, check out our Pokemon D&D campaign, and be sure to like and subscribe. Check out our Patreon, and you can get your name in the end credits. And I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye!